everyone, to a new episode of the Cradle News Roundup, coming to you live from our studios in Lebanon and somewhere else. In my case, thank you so much for joining us today. As usual, you know me. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I am the news editor for the Cradle, and I'm joined by writer and content creator for the Cradle, Karim Shami, and columnist and editor for the Cradle, Sharmin Narwani. And before we start, as usual, we just want to remind you, please make sure as soon as you arrive, just hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe to our channel, share this stream, and also check out our memberships, and in particular, check out our Patreon, where you can become a direct supporter or of the Cradle, and where you can find also some exclusive content that we have started to upload, including a very, very lovely discussion we had last week on the occasion of the 100th episode of the Cradle News Roundup. With that being said, we should start today's discussion in Lebanon, where it's the fifth anniversary of the Beirut port explosion, which killed about 220 people and injured thousands, around 7,000, nearly destroyed the capital city. If the blast hadn't happened by the sea, Beirut would simply be no more. Today, this is, like as I said, the fifth anniversary of a day that has lived in impunity for 5 years. No one has been prosecuted. No one has been found guilty for what happened, despite the fact that we've had, even here at the Cradle, we had multiple investigations pointing the finger at who was responsible for what happened that day. One of those investigations even landed one of our colleagues a 1 year prison sentence, declared in absentia by the Lebanese army, who at that point was headed by the now president of Lebanon, Joseph Aoun, who today gave a speech along with Prime Minister Nawab Salam, talking about how the law applies to all without exception. The blood of your loved ones will not be in vain. Justice is coming. This was what the leader said. And sources speaking to AFP have said that Judge Tarek Bitar, a very contentious figure, let's call him that, is apparently finished questioning defendants and may have some results coming very soon. I know you guys lived through the port explosion. I was not in Lebanon there. So I would like to hear from you on just maybe what this date means, and also what do you think about the statements that Salam and Aoun gave this morning?
It's really hard to take these guys seriously when they talk about, um, abiding by laws, abiding by agreements, etc. on one hand, and then they absolutely disregard it on the other. I think my experience here is, even though the government declared that it was an accident, nobody in Lebanon has ever really believed it. And I think after we've seen the explosion here, we've seen like the pager explosion, we've seen Raisi's helicopter go down. I mean, I think all these examples of interference and, point to sabotage. I think people think that this was an act conducted by a foreign state with the means. But, again, we have the people in charge then. Nothing's really changed.
Indeed.
It's frustrating, and to think that this judge is going to hand down in an era that's completely dominated by the Americans, that he's going to hand down a ruling on anything other than US enemies, kind of like how the killing of Rafi Hariri, the assassination of him, was treated, um, is a joke. I mean, let's see what they come up with.
You're
5 years
speaking a bit
after.
low, Sharmina. I just want to let you
Yeah.
know you're coming in a bit
Okay.
low, so maybe just project a bit more.
Really? Like, is this better?
This is better,
Yeah,
yes.
this is better.
Okay. I was talking low because, sorry, we have a new setup doing live in the studio. And so I can hear myself screaming in my ear, but I guess you guys can't.
So,
Yeah,
Karim, what do you make of this?
my experience was that used to work in a place near the port, and I left work like 1 hour prior to that, and the explosion happened, and the explosion was so loud, and the ground shook, that every single person in Beirut that you talk to thought that the explosion happened near him or inside his building. That how huge was the explosion was, and everybody saw and know the pictures and videos of the explosion. And regarding what Sharmin said, I think whoever did the explosion, if it was coincidence or if it was done by Israel, unfortunately, what's happening now, or what they even tried to do it even before 7th of October, uh, all what government is doing, trying to do, and the media is to frame Hezbollah, whether if it was Israel or a coincidence or whatever. That's what they are trying. They are trying to frame Hezbollah and to treat Hezbollah as if they are the devil, and everything that happens in the country as if Hezbollah is behind it. For me, being Lebanese and check and seeing what happened, I think I don't like 100% say it's coincidence, but such a coincidence might happen in a country like Lebanon, because a fire was like 4 hours before the explosion, and nobody's from the government said that there is chemicals there. They didn't warn anybody
They
to
sent first
like,
responders knowing full well.
yeah, they didn't say anything. For instance, in if any other country this happened, at least you have a minister or somebody who will tell you, please evacuate like 2 kilometers away from the port. Nobody said that, and most of the people that died, I think if they heard, or if the government took least precautions, I think that even the people that died, at least we would see half the numbers. So that's what happened in back then. And now I remember also what happened tells us that Lebanon as a country, we have no allies, because I don't recall any country that stepped in and helped Lebanon. I think only Egypt, they sold us glass, and that's it. I can't recall any other nation.
Well, there were, to be fair, there are quite a few countries set up sort of hospital camps around the city. I mean, I do remember that. I mean, aid did come in, and then a lot of NGOs came in and
A lot of
offered
NGOs.
up. Sorry.
A lot of NGOs. I was just
Yeah, a
stressing your
lot of
point.
NGOs came in and offered up, um, free treatment for people. There was someone in my home when the blast happened. I mean, our home was totaled. I have no idea how, and I was sitting next to an entire wall of glass. Like, I mean, literally an entire wall of glass, and it smashed onto my head. But I guess I was really close to the glass, so it hit me straight on. But if you'd been sort of like on the other side of the room, then the shards spin. And that's what happened to my friend. Her three fingertips were just severed by one piece of glass. She was in the doorway to the next room. And yet the whole wall hit me. And, but for initially, for a while, I remember we went to get like help from her. And I think for the first year, even things like physical therapy was available. And then after that, it just petered off. you know if you had a call with the persistent problem related to the explosion, just nobody cared. I do remember though, once the Lebanese army came, a bunch of soldiers came to my door. They were going door to door asking what damages were done, saying that, and I said, why do you want to do that? Why are you asking that? They said, because we're going to reimburse you. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're coming door to door to reimburse us now. Where were you in 2006?
During the
Where
war.
were you in that war? Of course, they never did reimburse, but, nonetheless, a lot of PR.
I was gonna ask you, did you ever get any of that reimbursement?
No, no, they came also they came to our house and nothing happened. Yeah, he just
I
sat, wrote some papers, and that's it. I remember.
I know that the way my wife, who is Lebanese, the way she tells me the story of what happened is that the day after, neither the army nor like security services were helping with the cleanup. That it was just the citizens. It was just the people of Beirut, the people of across Lebanon that were helping with the cleanup at the port site or near,
Well, to be
Gemaise, Mar
to be
Mikhail.
fair, I don't even know what Lebanon, a country that has little organized governance, had, whether they prepared emergency plans for this kind of thing. But in a sense, I think even if they'd organized things, people had to act first, because you couldn't walk on streets. I mean, in my area, you couldn't walk on streets without hearing, like, without having a few inches of glass, right, to walk on. So people needed to clear their areas, not wait for help to come. And I think that's why everyone jumped on board. But it was an astonishing day, I have to say, where, like Karim said, he's exactly right. Everybody thought like their building had been targeted, or their apartment, because it was so intense. And then to find out that it was miles away at the port was just incomprehensible. So the scale of the explosion was just, something that we couldn't wrap our heads around. But everybody helped everybody, and in silence. I saw people bleeding from top to bottom. Like I said, my friend had um, three of her fingertips amputated. And even she, when she was seeing the destruction around her, went quiet. Everyone went quiet, and everyone helped everyone. And if you got to the emergency room at hospital, we had to go to 6 emergency rooms, like increasingly outside of Beirut, before we got to a hospital who would see her, because amputation of fingers was so down low on the list in terms of severity. I mean, there were people lying on the floor unconscious in hospitals, and we were there within an hour of the explosion, and there was blood everywhere in these ERs. It was astonishing. I actually fell in love with Lebanon that day. It's a bizarre thing I reflect on later, because everyone would, I mean, talk about civilized. I'm sorry, if this happened elsewhere, there'd be like riots and looting and whatever. You know that. If electricity goes off in New York City, everyone's just
at
robbed
each other's
blind.
throats.
Yeah, but
Guys,
here, yeah,
just one thing, we are having audio issues. I also hear
okay,
you guys very low. So when you speak, just try to lean into the mic. I think I'm much louder than
okay.
the two of you.
Should we just do the
Oh,
volume?
Esteban's audio is not as clear as before,
No,
someone says.
that's
Well, that's.
lower. This is lower.
Let me just go over a couple of things.
Is this
I want
better, Esteban?
much better. I think
Okay,
that's much better.
okay.
I wanted to just go over a couple of things before we move on, because there's many topics that we can discuss, that we should discuss today. The judge in charge of the investigation, right, Tarek Bitar, from the moment he was named, or well, when he started, trying to name names who was responsible, he was accused of politicizing the investigation, not actually trying to find the culprits, or find, what happened that
Mm,
day, but much more to well, blame the resistance. And Akbar, Al Akbar, the Lebanese daily, in a report today, they said that he's under direct international pressure to politicize the case and direct accusations against Hezbollah. This has been the case since, like I said, since he was named in 2020. And now you have a government that was only formed, only came to be because of the war and because of the US pressure after the ceasefire, and Hezbollah agreed to, stop the war with Israel. Now it's just kind of like served in a silver platter, right? I don't know if you guys agree with me here, that whatever the decision is going to point to the resistance and is going to be used to further politicize the issue, in particular, given the fact that tomorrow there's a parliament session scheduled in Lebanon to discuss the disarmament of the resistance. And in particular, the government is facing intense US pressure to bring the topic to fore and to, well, disarm Hezbollah as quickly as possible.
yeah, it's not just a discussion. There's actually a vote that very well may be held. And ironically, the vote to disarm Hezbollah um, will be voted based on the Taif agreement, an old agreement, right? Like, forget the ceasefire agreement that took place in uh, in November. Was it November? No,
November, yeah.
in November. Forget
Yeah.
the ceasefire agreement that just took place months ago. They're going back to an old agreement. You know, um, so Hezbollah's response is, no, we're not going to disarm. We're occupied, morons. We're occupied. The south of Lebanon is occupied. They're killing people every day. They have had thousands upon thousands of violations, they meaning the Israelis. You'll see it, you'll note it, you don't condemn it, and you want Hezbollah to disarm. Somebody pointed out that this summer Lebanon has been a flood with tourists from abroad, not just Lebanese who haven't been back since the financial collapse and the war and etc. And the port blast, etc. But actual like foreigners too. Everything's heaving in the city, and somebody was saying, would they even come if Hezbollah didn't have weapons? Would the Israelis be in Beirut by now, like they are at the edge of Damascus?
Indeed.
I really don't know what these people are talking about, and it just astounds me. And Karim, I'm sure, being Lebanese, you must feel the same way, that these morons at the helm of the government, the prime minister especially, just and the president, talk about Hezbollah's weapons all the time, even though Israel's occupying the south, but they do not address Israel's occupation. They rarely talk about it, and then if asked, it'll be like we're dealing with the Americans and our negotiations or whatever. And they don't even discuss what happened 6 years ago when every single Lebanese citizen lost their bank deposits. And now we're hearing that these guys are going to bring in reform, finance reform package that will basically wipe out everyone's deposits, and it's a start over. You know what I mean? And they're talking about Hezbollah's weapons. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, of course. And I just have a comment when Esteban said there's immense US pressure on the government. I don't think there's a pressure on the government. I think these people came and they were appointed for only this purpose, to weaken Hezbollah or to disarm Hezbollah, or to politicize everything circling Hezbollah. So that's their
Mhm.
job. And if they fail, they will fail in the eyes of the Americans, not in the eyes of the patriotic Lebanese people. So that's we're living in a very tense and important times. We'll see what will happen tomorrow. There's multiple officials and politicians who said that they might postpone the voting uh, after 2 days, but also this means we will still having the vote this week. And what's the meaning of the vote? They want to vote to disarm Hezbollah, but if they voted to disarm Hezbollah, who will disarm Hezbollah?
Nobody can. That's the whole point. I was
Yeah,
talking to an army guy just at a coffee shop the other day, and there I think he was possibly someone who wasn't so favorable towards Hezbollah, not overtly, but he said, yeah, they're probably going to vote for this, um, and I was like, and are you going to go in and disarm them? Are you going to go? You can't even go in the Palestinian camps. Remember that story? Just in July, right? In July, Palestinian camps were supposed to be disarmed.
It was June. It was in June.
June? Was it
Yeah,
June? Hasn't
it's
happened
June.
by the way, guys. Hasn't happened. And they're going to go to disarm Hezbollah. It's a colossal joke. But it's what even weak governments do, who are basically under pressure by a much bigger patron, is they use whatever legitimacy, the sliver of legitimacy they enjoy just by being in certain positions, to pass laws. It's lawfare. You pass laws that then are really hard to overturn or will take some effort to overturn. Let them come at the resistance. I mean, the fact is, certainly 40% of this country is pro the resistance, if not a much larger chunk that fears the resistance not being here. I mean, and don't forget, they're talking about disarming Hezbollah at a time when Al Qaeda, okay, HTS run government in Syria, are threatening to, come over the Lebanese border and show the Lebanese what's what, right? So the president, Joseph Aoun, though this was denied to me for sure, Joseph Aoun asked Hezbollah to help with the border issue, and Hezbollah said, "Well, no, we're focused on the south." They need to get their crazy right-wing Christian militias who have some villages around there to get involved. These guys have been waving around their arms and like beating their chests for so long. Let them fight. But I don't know where this is going
I
to go.
mean,
yeah,
something
It's a
worth
stupid
mentioning.
thing.
Something just worth mentioning quickly is the return of Morgan Ortagus. Morgan Ortagus is apparently headed back to Lebanon
Well,
after
they're
Tom
also
Barak failed, I guess.
I no, I mean Tom Barrack's in the news today still. So I
Mm,
think I did read something saying no, 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 that was just a rumor. Barack is staying.
mm.
We don't know. I mean, if Trump is going to change people every time, every few months because
Taco,
they were unable to like get rid of Hezbollah's weapons, he's going to be changing. We'll have 4 or 5 new
a
emissaries every
revolving
year.
door. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just it's not a possible thing, and I don't agree with Kenny entirely. I do think the pressure is there. Like they're not allowed to breathe for 1 second without what's going on with Hezbollah's weapons. That kind of relentless, aggressive pressure continues.
We
yeah.
have a
First, I
donation
want
from Gulnara Marchis. Thank you so much. Sorry, Karim. This is the last time I cut you off. Go ahead.
no. I That's what I wanted to say. You were faster than me. I just wanted to clarify also one thing. that is very important. That we have always, I explain it. We have a party in Lebanon called Lebanese Forces,
Mm.
and their gangs, when they go, they are officials and politicians and deputies in the government, but for me they are gangs. When they go to the TV, they are threatening Hezbollah and the Shias and the people that support Hezbollah, regardless of their ethnicity, by Israel. And they are
Mm.
saying if Hezbollah doesn't hand his weapon, Israel will bomb them.
They promote
And
the Zionist talking points. They use the
yeah,
same talking
100%.
points. It's
Oh,
the same narrative.
It's
they
so
love
disgusting.
Israel. They love Israel. Israel is a declared enemy of the Lebanese state that exists to this day. They love Israel. They'll openly talk about it. I just want to say, like, people shouldn't fret too much about this. I remember like a almost a worse time, like with the former prime minister Fouad Senora, and like the just gang of absolute thugs that went after or tried to blame Syria first and couldn't find any evidence, tried to, went back and forth between Hezbollah and Syria to blame for Rafiq Hariri's assassination, right? And these guys were so thuggish and they absolutely thought, like, just walk over, like law of the jungle, walk over the rights of Lebanese, like the Shia are not Lebanese. It was such a thuggish time. And there was one particular awful person who was head of the ISF. I mean, they basically controlled all the institutions after the coup d'etat of 2005. And there were worse times. I mean, at that point, you know, I think the world hadn't changed as much. The Americans could do whatever they wanted anywhere. They could have this kangaroo court over the assassination, drag Lebanon into, sort of like this criminal investigation, pull in members of the resistance axis for the UN to point fingers at. I mean, they could do anything they wanted. Today, you have like those guys light, but the global situation is much changed. Now, of course, there's a lot of propaganda here in this region. I mean, Karim, the Western propaganda is magnified and amplified by Gulf propaganda, which pays for most of Lebanon's publications and TV outlets.
And
So
media, yeah.
it's just complete saturation of anti-Iran, anti-Hizb, pro-America, pro-France kind of propaganda. But really, a lot of it's talk. They can't disarm Hezbollah. They cannot do that. By the way, Trump just said, I think it was Trump who just said, um, Israel will only leave Lebanon when Hezbollah is disarmed, which is a ridiculous. Of course, then they will never leave Lebanon. And B, hello, what agreement was that part of? Israel was supposed to leave Lebanon 60 days after November, right? The November agreement. So, I don't know why people still listen to the Americans. Anyways, I think a lot of people will be in a holding pattern in this region because the world is changing so swiftly and every event is having massive repercussions. And I think we're going to get to a point where their projects in this region are just not sustainable.
Yeah,
Uh,
I also want to add, yani, now they are stationed in only five small points on the border. The moment Hezbollah, let's say Hezbollah hands their weapons, the moment they hand their weapon, Israel will invade and take at least 40% of Lebanon, as they did
Mm.
in
in
Syria.
Syria.
Lebanon is a very small country. In Syria, they took around 3,500 kilometers squared. Whole of Lebanon is 10,400 kilometers squared, so it's very easy for them. And they often talk that they want the Litani River and they want the water and blah blah blah. And also there is an interesting, for me it was an interesting question. Uh, I I lost it, but I know what the question was. The question was why Lebanese people don't protest against the
Uh,
violations. We're living in a very sensitive moments in Lebanon, or in a time where if you protest and somebody died or somebody was injured, you can ignite a civil war. So that's
yeah.
why, in my opinion, nobody is calling for a protest.
It's also a society, Lebanon, that has, first of all, been drained of its young people. Like many young Lebanese left after the crisis of 2019, and they still continue to do so. It's a society that, just remember, just a couple of years ago, people were forced to go with weapons or with gasoline into the bank branches to demand a return of their savings, which are being withheld since 2019. It's a society that experienced one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in human history, and the next day had to themselves pick up the pieces and help out each other. And
Mm.
so asking for protest right now is not really, you're not going to see it, especially because, as you say, Karim, is also very fragmented, and the sectarian lines can very quickly be inflamed. So what people need to understand about Lebanon is this is a country that is living under crushing crisis after crushing crisis, and its people are either leaving or are simply like fed up and are learning to live in the wrong way, even if that means, like I said, going into bank branches carrying toy guns to demand that they return their savings. So I think
Those are fun days.
that was some of the most fun stories I've ever had to write.
And they would videotape themselves, and they wouldn't get into trouble. They would get out of prison if they were kept in there, even because they weren't going to harm anyone.
Yeah,
And I'm sure the bank's rules were like, okay, if somebody comes in even posing a threat, do what they say and then call the authorities. But people were let out of prison because they obviously, I mean, first of all, the banks are the ones illegally holding on to Lebanese money,
yeah,
right? So these people were legally, legally should have been able to claim their money. But the fact that is there is a unifying issue in Lebanon, and it's the deposits, the depositors'
yes,
money. Like what they've been so. This is what I was saying at the beginning. They're going to be groomed and tamed to accept this loss, but actually. Everyone in Lebanon could go in the streets tomorrow, and I don't know, the government would collapse because they're not even talking about it. And I'm telling you guys, I'm telling you, for any Lebanese watching this, I am hearing that the government, not even the IMF and the World Bank, but the government, the people who are governing you, who you voted for, are trying to, for the sake of the banks, get rid of the depositor problem. You're going to lose your entire life saving if you don't hit the streets, if you don't do something about it.
completely believable. Completely believable. And now they have like the doors open. I think the threat from Syria is going to be the greatest. After all, moving down the line, from Hezbollah, maybe we'll have Julani offering to come in and disarm the Hezbollah. We'll see. Let's move on to a different topic. Israel, as you like to term them or call them, Charmin, the boiling frog is really starting to feel the heat. You had over the weekend 19 former commanders of the Mossad, of the Shin Bet, of the army, I think even former prime minister, put out a video calling for the genocide in Gaza, well, the war, to end because they say that we are at the precipice of defeat. And then, on top of that, you have a letter of 550 or possibly more former members of Israel's security services and army calling for
And
the
former
same.
prime ministers.
And former prime minister, former, like just a deluge, just to say it in a certain way, of calls for this to end. And then also one last thing I want to mention that I broke this morning: the army chief is at it's butting heads with the political leadership over the lack of a clear objective in Gaza and the lack of a strategy. Remember Gideon's chariots, which was the operation that they launched, I think, after breaking the
Mm.
ceasefire in May, was supposed to defeat Hamas, right? And it
Yes.
winded down over the weekend without achieving its goals, like it has been the case since 7 October of 2023. And now the army leadership is also saying, if we stay in Gaza, we're going to have a more of a catastrophic situation with the army and with the fact that if you really want us to take over Gaza and, remove Hamas, it's going to take years. They're talking about occupying Gaza is going to take months. And then actually, removing Hamas, whatever that means, is going to take years. So how is the temperature around the frog, Charmaine?
It's very high. And this is why last week I was saying, I kind of want to dive deep into the Hebrew media here at the Cradle and start to report heavily from there because we don't see their articles in English. And the Hebrew press is very openly critical. I mean, the Hebrew press is sort of, you have the right wing and the left wing and the middle and whatever. So they go at each other, and they expose things that Western media will never cover, even though it's confirmed as fact by Israelis themselves. So
Yeah.
yeah, as you said, the army chief of staff Zamir um, is butting heads with the prime minister saying that there is no plan. I mean, what are you expecting from us? There's no plan. I think the idea for him is to not even occupy Gaza, okay, but basically move Israeli forces to around the borders,
To surround it, yeah.
to surround it. And he says that any continuation of this war puts Israeli troops at incredible risk. They have been taking death after death after death. I mean, basically, in areas that are wiped out, yet still Qassam brigades forces emerge in sort of, very now practiced formations to take out an Israeli armored vehicle, to take out an entire group of soldiers at the area. And almost every day now we're hearing, how the Hebrew media says a dangerous situation has emerged in this place in Gaza. We all know what that means. That means Israeli soldiers have been killed or badly injured. So Zamir opposes, basically, and the army opposes a full occupation of the Gaza Strip, which is Netanyahu's wet dream, him and his cabinet. So uh, he says, you even if you went full out and took over everything, and it would still take you a few months, but to actually clear the land and go and find the tunnels and everything unencumbered, okay, with no pushback, would
Mhm.
take several years. So, he's proposing a strategy of encirclement and attrition. Whatever the Israelis come up with, the point is Netanyahu is not giving an inch. He's thwarting negotiations at every turn. I mean, even it's so bizarre that the Egyptians and the Qataris, I mean, the Egyptians are smacking Hamas left, right, and center. There's like a little headbutting going on there too, because Hamas has exposed that the Egyptians are not actually letting in as much aid as they claim in order to placate the Israelis. The Egyptians are doing this. Sisi's government, when there's approval for the trickle of aid that is getting approved, okay, and only because of massive international pressure, Sisi's regime is actually not letting some of that aid through to make the Israelis happy. I mean, you think you've seen it all, and then you see Sisi or Mohammed bin Zayed or Aliyev from Azerbaijan or Erdogan from Turkey. It's just, or the Palestinian Authority's own
Oh my
president,
God.
Mahmoud Abbas. What did he say this weekend? Uh, It's
We are ready to have a Palestinian state that is unarmed or something like
that
along
is
those lines.
unarmed.
Yeah.
That is unarmed, basically. I mean,
Hmm.
at a time where, he's pushing for this two-state solution so much, even though people are now exposing that the French initiative to sort of recognize two states, which is followed by a lot of European countries saying they're going to recognize it, is just only going to be on paper. Because if you look at the French terms under which statehood could exist and would be recognized, it is an disarmed Palestine. It is, you know, only approved parties can run, political parties can run. Hamas can never run as a political party because, as you know, in 2006, when the Palestinian Authority held the last elections in Palestine, Hamas won everywhere. There were 6 seats up for grabs in, predominantly Christian or, originally Christian Ramallah, okay? Now the Palestinian temporary capital, and they all went to Hamas. Christians voted for them. Anything but these idiots. So he says, Mahmoud Abbas says, we want the state of Palestine to be unarmed, including in the Gaza Strip. I don't know.
Yeah, and
What's wrong with
also
the Arabs, Karim?
I prefer not to say. So, uh, yeah, you were talking about also, we have to shed light more on the Israeli media. Yesterday, I was watching Hebrew media, and I think it was on channel 12. They had this writer, and he said he had a theory, and after I heard it from him, now I realize it. He said he thinks that the push for the recognition of Palestinian state is also uh, Israeli propaganda, because he said this will never hurt the Israelis, but what will hurt us is sanctions. And now they are pivoting from sanctions to recognition of state of Palestine. And this is not very bad for the Israelis, because Israelis, uh, if Macron, as you say, you stated them, if Macron wants to declare that he now recognize a state of Palestine, as if he's saying, I recognize Mahmoud Abbas,
Yeah,
PA,
it's
there's
a
no
state.
difference.
It's a state on paper. And Trump is obsessed with the Abraham Accords, which his like beloved son-in-law started, right? And
Hmm.
initiated. And he just wants to keep collecting nations so he can, because he figures this is the easy way to have victories. This guy just wants victories, whatever shape or form it takes. Palestinian statehood, when it's driven by the people who are driving this current initiative, the Saudis, the French, um, it will be nothing, will be absolutely nothing. And when Palestinians, when, I mean, before the war, before October 7th, the idea of two-state solution was dead. And
Hmm.
people were talking about one state, equal rights for all. And now they're trying to bury that idea, but they're also trying to protect Israel because um, Israel is spiraling downwards so fast, so badly, economically, militarily, psychologically. Nobody feels safe there anymore. I mean, if you read the Hebrew media, um, every single day, people are saying, I can't live here anymore. Every single day. And commanders, I mean, people are killing themselves, people in the army, they're not showing
Seven
up.
suicides in July,
Yeah, yeah.
just in
So,
July.
I mean, that's nothing. That sounds low, if you ask me. But they and they've realized, and I was reading uh this editorial, I think it was in Yediot Ahronot, basically saying that the army believes that any war of attrition, like continuation of this war, instead of draining Hamas, Hamas will drain what's left of the Israeli, forces, ground forces, through continued guerrilla warfare. And yeah, I mean, I actually believe that. And that's from the Israelis, okay? Just take it to the bank. At the same time, negotiations look to be going nowhere. I mean, there's talk about what's his name again? Witkoff. I forget because he's so inconsequential now. We thought he would like nip things in the bud with Russia, Ukraine, and then in Gaza, and the guy's done nothing. Um,
He
so
did something very despicable this weekend that I just want to bring up. He visited the Gaza,
oh
the
yeah.
south. He visited Rafah, one of the GHF distribution sites,
Mm,
and then he told the families and he told everyone that there's no starvation in Gaza because of what I saw. And what he saw was a stage scene that the IDF and Yasser Abu Shabab's gangs set up to show, happy Palestinians getting food and being, eating, and they're not actually skin and bones. These were the families of the gang members. These were, other collaborators. And Witkoff accepts this as, at face value, and then reports back saying, no, there's actually no starvation in Gaza. Same for Mike Huckabee. Like I said, a complete pantomime, a complete
mm,
setup. And now, actually, this week, he's headed to Russia. He's expected in Russia Thursday, Friday. So it seems, like as you're saying, Charmaine, ceasefire talks are going nowhere. Over the weekend, something that caused a lot of stir and is like, raising up the temperature of the proverbial frog is the videos of the Israeli captives, of the soldiers,
mm,
or, any captive who remains in Gaza, who are also skin and bones, right? Like completely wasting away. And Abu Obeida announced yesterday saying,
mm,
we are willing to work with the Red Crescent or the Red Cross into bringing aid into Gaza as long as all of the openings are, well, open. All of the entries into Gaza are open, and as long as the bombing stops, we are there to help bring in the aid. Because at the same time, the captives that we still have here in Gaza are wasting away because the same food that we eat are the food that we give them, and they are not going to get any special privilege.
yeah.
And also, there's no food.
Yeah,
So
and I
yeah,
mean, the Israelis took the video footage of their super skinny soldiers in captivity, and said, how cruel are these people? They're deliberately starving the Israelis held there, which is like, to so many people, like, are you kidding me? You know, You've caused mass starvation on a population of 2 point something million people, and you're talking about this one guy who probably can't receive it. And remember what the Israelis say, or actually like American Jews, heard them say, Zionists basically saying, well, um, it's not humanitarian if they're getting the minimum caloric intake a day. So I guess the Israeli captives are getting minimum caloric intake a day. You have a problem with that when it's a Jew,
The
but
Austrian
not when
painter
it's a
would be
non-Jew.
proud.
Yeah. And Qassam Brigade said, Abu Ubaidah said, we do not intentionally starve the captives. They eat from the same provisions available to our fighters and the general population, but they will not receive special privileges amid this ongoing crime of starvation and blockade. Rightfully so. Now, this starvation policy, okay, is really irking Israelis, Israelis who have to be front and center with foreign leaders and, basically outside of Israel, because we have seen a flurry of activities, including um, a big billboard in
Oh
Times
my
Square
God.
trying to
Yes.
show that no, we're not starving anyone. We're bringing aid trucks,
Because
and then
it
and then
wasn't just the billboard. Just let me quickly interject here. It wasn't just the
mm,
billboard. I saw multiple headlines from outlets, from Western outlets, talking about what Abu Obeida said and taking it completely out of context. Just
yeah,
taking it completely out of context.
and then talking about Trump saying no, no, this is unacceptable. We're going to make sure these people eat. Okay, like he literally. And then it turns out that only $3 million of U.S. assistance has gotten to people, and we don't even know if the assistance has gotten to the right
How
people.
many did
Just
he claim? He claimed he had given 60 million, and
60
it ended up
million.
being just three.
Yeah. And then the State Department confirmed that only 30 million was approved for the GHF, um, with only 3 million dispersed so far. 3 million for 2 point something million population.
And you have well, I just want to mention also quickly Anthony Aguilar, the former Green Beret lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army, who's like still
Mhm.
giving interviews. The interview with Tucker Carlson was one of the toughest things I've ever seen. The same, I think he was speaking with CBS or some other outlet. He spoke over the weekend with some other like major U.S. outlet. Like this man has really taken the flag, And this is a guy who genuinely believes Hamas put babies into microwaves and hung them from the with clothespins on October the 7th. And even a person with that, belief in his mind goes out and says, what we're doing over there is a war crime. And he gives every single warning saying, if we don't do something now, we're all complicit.
Yeah. I mean, there were signs about David Lammy and Keir Starmer being complicit in genocide on the London tube this week. So for some reason, the genocide didn't really make the headlines, but the starvation thing has gotten world leaders commenting. I'm really not sure why this and not that. The absolute carpet bombing of people, burning hospitals down, people on fire, patients who were, hooked up to IVs who couldn't move and save themselves from fires. Those things didn't create this kind of outcry on the sort of like on the power level, but the starvation is, I mean, whatever the case may be, um, beware the solutions that the people still selling weapons to Israel come up with. And one of those is a two-state solution now. There's no way there's anything good coming along with that proposal.
Karim, do you want to read it? We got a couple of donations. I don't know if you want to go over them. Do you see them?
Yeah, we have our friend Love 66 donated 10 euros. Egypt GCC
10
state
pounds.
10
10
pounds.
pounds.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm not good in money. Egypt GCC, meaning the
Gulf
Gulf
Cooperation Council.
states, Arab
Mhm.
states, yes,
Mm.
are all
Police states.
police states. Hence, the people cannot protest. Now, Europe, especially Germany and UK, are becoming police states. Can change come about peacefully anywhere.
Peaceful change
Uh,
is an invention.
yeah, هلا Egypt Egypt has become a police state since many years, but I don't know about the GCC. The GCC, the way they were created, uh, and the people that were there and the history, I don't think that even the people want to
Yeah.
protest. We only had the protests in Bahrain and some places in Kuwait, but in Saudi Arabia, their history and the people there, I don't think they care to protest the way they are raised and everything. It's very difficult for them
These
to
are also
protest. That's
nations in
one.
which there's like, the most of the population is immigrants. I think Saudi Arabia, only 60% are actually Saudis, and UAE is like what, like 30% are actually Emiratis. The rest are like
Mm.
from all over the world. We have
Yes,
another one, another
yes.
donation from History, Economy, Entertainment, and Commentary. They said disunity happened before the Crusades, and again now. It is unity which should be the focus. If the Organization of Islamic Countries, I think, is OIC, right, can speak
Mhm.
in one voice and act as one. Well, thank you so much for your donation. We shall hopefully but yeah, yeah. So Karim Arno, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, I didn't answer that question. Can change come about peacefully anywhere? I think he's asking if there's can through protests can we achieve peace? Unfortunately, no, and this is why we are here.
This is why they're trying
That's
to
why
stamp
we are.
down resistance in the way
Yeah,
that they
that's
are.
100%. That's why we are here defending Hezbollah, not handing over his weapons. So I never saw a struggle that was won without armed forces,
And
except
resistance.
maybe Gandhi. But I think the UK was going
They were
to
done with India
withdraw
by that
from
point. Yeah.
India, whether there was Gandhi or not.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, so I think this is, the concerted effort. This is why, like, you have Mahmoud Abbas coming out and saying we want a Palestinian state without arms. Uh, they want to make him into, like, oh, look, you can actually have the solution without arms. But we're talking about the state that is committing the modern day Holocaust. How can you trust their word when they violate every single agreement and when they continue to starve children for absolutely no reason other than they want to see them dead?
Mm. You know, for every action, there is a reaction, folks. And this is really important. As I've often said, sometimes you can get really uber focused on the weeds and miss the big picture, the developments happening behind the scenes. And there's so many. And this is, I think, what the cradle's here for is to not just repeat the stuff that is elsewhere, but actually look behind the scenes, what's happening, from whether it's the king of Malaysia going to meet Putin for the first time, or there are entire countries. How? Or negatively, the Armenia is holding joint military exercises with the U.S. this month. You
They
know,
just reported that the presidents of Armenia and Azerbaijan are going to Washington this week to sign a peace agreement, to sign a peace memorandum. They called it something like that.
yeah, and maybe it'll wake Moscow up a little bit because Moscow, obviously, being involved with the Ukraine war, really took a backseat on what was happening there. They offered intervention in the last Nagorno-Karabakh war, and the Armenians said no because this Armenian president Pashinyan is an absolute American NATO tool. So, nonetheless, and what happens to small tools is they're the first to get snuffed out. Like, I don't know why these small tools don't learn, but I also keep in mind that what happens when uncontested, these players hanging on to the unipolar world and betting everything on the Americans or the Israelis or the British, right? The old order are going to lose everything if things switch. All right. And right now, it's not like everyone's hanging their hats on the Americans. The Turks, for instance, the Azerbaijanis, they have their own plan. It happens to suit NATO's interest. But one of the things I want to touch on is, and I think we mentioned in the headline of this week's live podcast, is pipeline wars. So these that we'll discuss are not about actual pipeline battles, but this is the kind of so Turkey, Azerbaijan, the Qataris are aggressively pursuing um, pipeline uh, construction through Iraq, through Syria, in order to, get ahead of their competition. And their competition isn't often the other side, but it's their own neighbors who they're friends with, the UAE versus Saudi Arabia versus Qatar, or Gulf countries versus Turkey, or versus Iran. So there's this competition brewing, and everyone's taken such an interest in pipelines and railroads and routes and stuff since the Chinese launched their Belt and Road Initiative, right?
Mhm.
And the Americans have announced several counters to the Chinese BRI, none of which have materialized. But local players and U.S. proxies can't have their local competitors get ahead of them. So we're seeing a number of projects go full steam ahead. Syrian officials inaugurated last week a new regional gas transmission pipeline to deliver millions of cubic meters of gas to Syria from Azerbaijan via Turkey. So Turkey's dream, and when the cradle first started, we'd actually written a few articles about this. That Erdogan's dream is to become the gas hub between Asia and Europe. And so now he's trying to make that happen. So the pipeline is goes from Azerbaijan through Turkey, um, and Qatar has paid for much of this. Qatar and Turkey are very much in alignment, both very pro-Muslim Brotherhood countries, and therefore kind of not, you know, having enmity from the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Egyptians, even, who really are very against Muslim Brotherhood. Um, so, the idea was to help Damascus get a decent supply of natural gas. And Jordan plays a part of this. In March, Qatar and the Jordanian Energy Ministry signed an agreement for Qatar to provide Damascus with this natural gas. Notice that they didn't give a damn about Syria's electricity and gas needs during the war that Turkey, Qatar,
Until
Jordan
December.
all played key roles in, right, in toppling the government of former Syrian President Bashar al Assad, and who worked closely with the US, Israel, and Britain and others to bring the former ISIS deputy commander and Al Qaeda leader Ahmad al Shara, or Jolani, into power. Um, and just days before Assad fell, the Turkish energy minister actually announced that Ankara planned to resume the construction of a pipeline linking Qatar's massive, gas field, North Field gas reserves to Turkey's pipeline, its TANAP network. Um, but listen to this: if those are linked, the pipeline network would bring Qatari gas to Europe, okay, via Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and finally Turkey. So what happened to IMEC, the India Middle East Corridor project? Do you know what I mean? I mean, what, I don't know. I don't know if these guys are going to start contesting and competing with each other, or if they're going to link up. I've never seen these players link up. Everybody wants to be the dominant man
Indeed.
among these players, and let's be honest, like, when pipelines or routes or railways or whatever, basically transportation corridors go through your country's geography, you get paid for that every time a cargo ship, or not cargo ship, but like, a cargo train and trucks, etc., traverse your territory. So everyone's going to want a piece of this, and they're going to fight for it eventually. But at the same time, there's another project that the Turks are pushing on. They want to spend $40 billion to build a pipeline in Iraq to supplement and enhance their development road, which links southern Iraq, which is at the northern tip of the Persian Gulf, all the way through Turkey and then onward to Europe. And Turkey is now capitalizing on a sense that Iran does not enjoy the same foothold it had in Iraq, thinking again, believing again, the propaganda and the little facts that we know about the resistance axis crashing and burning. So they want to take whatever little advantages they've negotiated with the government in Baghdad, and now really have a lot of expand to have a lot of economic clout. economic clout, meaning political power in Iraq as well. So Turkey at the center of a lot of this, and Turkey is on the main artery, the main pathway of China's BRI into Europe. And I've always wondered, I mean, at least for the last few years, how China's ever going to institute this with a Turkey that is so intent on creating its own networks.
Mhm.
And we'll see. We'll see what China does about
I
this.
want to thank Khalil for a donation he made a few minutes ago. I think this is Swedish krona. Thank you so much. Make sure to leave your like, everyone who's here. Please just make sure to leave that thumbs up. As far as Turkey and the pipelines, my question is because we have been hearing over the past few weeks, and you know, to answer your question, Sharmin, about what about IMEC? IMEC
Mm,
is kind of an Israeli project, right? It's like a Zionist project that it seeks to make, I think, the port of Haifa into the big exporter of all of this gas, etc., to Europe. And a few months ago, I think just early this year, there were like all of these reports about like are Israel and Turkey headed to war in Syria. And we always talk of obviously, you know, Turkey, a member of NATO, a big ally of Israel, like despite what Erdogan says, they're big allies with Azerbaijan as well. But nevertheless, is this fight gonna turn into something more serious? You know, and actually, I wanna ask you, Karim, what do you think that Turkey's long-term game is here?
I think what's happening currently, not only between Azerbaijan and Syria, but in the whole region, is a result of Hezbollah losing the war against Israel,
Hezbollah in
which is
particular.
yeah, which led to Hezbollah being weak in Lebanon, and now we are talking that tomorrow they will vote in the parliament against the weapon of Hezbollah, and also which led to the fall or disappearance or the vanishing of uh, Al-Assad, which led to all these projects to be opened in Syria, whether the Azerbaijani one, whether the relations that they are talking about between Syria and or the peace talks between Syria and Israel, seeing Trump's posters in Damascus, and of course the routes that they are talking about now. So I think everybody wants to take the advantage because they don't know what the next year or the next month is hiding for them. So they are signing all these deals because it's very difficult for them to like step back after signing these deals. يعني currently they signed a deal between Azerbaijan and Syria, and now we will see the flow of gas from Azerbaijan to Syria. But for instance, this project I think is more guaranteed than Sharia himself, than Julani himself. Yeah, and this project might last 10 years, but Julani, we don't know if he will last one day or 1 week or 1 year.
He might not make it
So
to
yeah,
2026.
yeah. So that's why we're seeing many projects, and I think that's my opinion, because usually in this region they take their time in projects. Now we're
To
seeing
build, you
projects,
mean?
yeah,
Yes.
everywhere, and they want to build road and this stuff. So unfortunately, that's my opinion regarding what's happening, and that's why we're not hearing about all projects because the all projects were written as the region was divided. Yeah, for instance, we had Lebanon, Syria, maybe Iraq or part of Iraq, Iran in one side, Qatar and Turkey on one side, and the Gulf countries in one side, and of course Turkey and Qatar and uh, the Gulf countries and Egypt, but in different in various ways, they try to benefit or to help the Israelis and the Americans, and Lebanon, Syria, and Iran were in the opposite of that. But now, after the fall of Syria, which for me happened because Hezbollah was weakened, we're seeing all these deals being signed in, and I don't think there's a long project for that. This happened because, as I said, that's because Bashar al-Assad disappeared.
He apparently
Okay,
did an
that's a new
interview with
one.
some Russian outlet, right, or some Arab outlet, and is expected to be published. I want to mention two items before you go on, Charmaine. One, and it's just about this idea about the pipelines. Today, Reuters came out with a report talking to a bunch of independent Chinese oil firms, and they confirmed that the China, or well, these oil firms are expected to double their output in Iraq by 2030. They are significantly expanding their presence in Iraqi oil fields. And also today, Bloomberg reported that Saudi Aramco, the state-owned oil giant, their shares slumped 14% in 2025. They performed the worst among all global oil majors. And, things are not looking very good for Vision 2030. This reminded me of what Karim was saying about the project that take forever to be built. It feels like Saudi Arabia is going to start to feel the burn.
Um, it just depends on so much. And I want to say, I mean, one of the things that just jumps to my head immediately, Turkey is going to build a $40 billion pipeline through Iraq. And then it's trying to, instead of bringing primarily Qatari gas, though that's coming too. So it's Qatari gas, its ally from the Persian Gulf, and then Azerbaijani gas from the north, right, to Syria. What about the Persian Gulf states? What about the Arabs? Syria, Iraq, Egypt, the crown jewels of the Arab world, right? They're just going to go to Turkey. Syria and Iraq are going to go to Turkey. Turkey's going to be the big economic, you know, um, guru there. I mean, I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. I think this is going to be played out in much competition. This is not going to be allowed. I mean, part of why I think the Saudis got involved in Syria later on in a positive way with Assad. So the UAE and the Saudis is because they were very much worried about a complete takeover of the north by Turkish forces and for Turkey to integrate that. So the Turkish, the Iran versus Arab, narrative that we've been fed for a very long time in this region now may just flip to, Turkey versus Arab narrative, which is actually grounded in something. I mean, Turkey is trying to take all the prizes right now, and we saw that when we did that article. I think we mentioned it in our last podcast. We did an article about how Turkey is hatching a plan from its bases, intelligence officers that it has based in Damascus, to infiltrate Tripoli. I say, why are they based in Damascus? Because Damascus Tripoli is a historic route. Okay. And you have a lot of supporters of the new Syrian HTS government in Tripoli, and I'm talking not Libya, Lebanon, right? And so Turkey is now trying to hatch a plan to like maybe be the ones to expand the port in Tripoli, historic port, and to basically uh, subsidize and become the main holders of the main oil refinery there that is sort of like a doddering one or is shut down. So it has economic aspirations in northern Lebanon. And after that, you saw the Saudi ambassador make a beeline to reestablish himself in Tripoli among the Zaim there, the wealthy and the old families of Tripoli and the ones with political clout. So I think we're just barely scratched the surface of what will eventually become an Egyptian, Emirati, and Saudi competition with Turkey in this region. They may play ball with Turkey in some arenas, but they will contest them in others. That's my take, at least.
What do you think, Karim?
I agree. Of course, eventually they will clash because their aim was to down Bashar al-Assad, and now he's not there. And I don't think they have like a clear plan for the next day because it took them 14 years.
To get rid of him.
And yeah, and the prime minister of Qatar,
Hegemony is their
yeah,
plan. Money, power,
yeah, but Ben Jassim, the prime minister of Qatar,
former.
foreign prime minister of Qatar, he said it. He said it. Uh, Bashar al-Assad and Syria was a prey, and eventually, what happened is that we fought each other on that prey. So, and this will happen again. Now the prey is gone. Now they will fight each other. This is
100%.
their
And
mentality. They have to dominate. And me, as a Lebanese living here, and Sharmin also knows, for instance, Saudi Arabia loves to dominate Lebanon. They don't allow any other party. Now they don't talk about Lebanon. Why? Because they are sad. Why they are sad? Because there's many people talking about Lebanon. We want it all for us. The same thing they do to Bahrain, the same thing they try to do to Qatar. But Qatar had an Udeid base and these stuff. So that's the mentality of Saudi Arabia, for instance.
But I mean, it's funny that there are some Persian Gulf countries. I mean, even the Saudis, I really think they have suddenly found common cause with Iran. They don't like this whole Azerbaijan with its energy resources, Turkey without it, but needs it. They don't like this constellation
But
that's happening that is trying now to, to 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 be in charge, to launch and to run and own the corridors that are being created in West Asia,
but
right?
oh,
And
but yes, sure, sorry.
no, you seemed like
Yeah,
you
yeah,
really wanted to say
yeah.
something.
I wanted to say something just to clarify, also for our viewers. So now Turkey and Azerbaijan are allies, and we have Qatar and Turkey are allies. But we have to know also the gas that is being produced and exported from Azerbaijan via Turkey, they are through pipelines. They are not liquefied natural gas.
Mm,
And Qatar main export is LNG. So Qatar, they control the market in Europe and other places through their LNG products. Yani a country have to have an LNG infrastructure to liquefy the gas and use it, while Azerbaijan uses the technology of Russia
mm.
through pipelines directly
Yeah.
from the source to the factory or to a building. So I don't think currently Qatar and Azerbaijan, I don't think there will be conflict. They are not eating from each other's market.
Not Qatar and Azerbaijan. I'm talking about the Saudis and the Emiratis. And I mean, you guys have followed the cradle long enough to know like these little distinctions. So as Karim said, the Qataris and the Turks got very tight during the Arab Spring conflicts because they were both pushing the Muslim Brotherhood in all these countries. And then uh, the Azerbaijan is part of Turkey's uh, Turkic project to try to infiltrate the South Caucasus, Central Asia, through a Turkish connection, Turkish language, Turkish ethnicity, Turkish.
And funding parties also.
Yeah, but
They
I
are
mean,
funding.
Turkey's also not wealthy right now. I mean, if you go to Turkey, Turks are the
I,
ones complaining most. I mean, I
I
guess
know.
Erdogan's spending his money overseas, but on business, right? On the big Turkish conglomerates that maybe have the money to put up these things or to create these projects, but not the regular Turkish people. So, the Gulf will be, a lot of the Arab world will be very startled by the idea that Turkey rushes in the day after with pipelines and roadways and whatnot and ports. It's this was the UAE's big project, two ports, and so the race is on. The race is on. Every single one of that side of the pro US, the pro West, unipolar side is literally, you know, throwing themselves at the opportunities that are arising out of the chaos happening in this region. And the thing is, they're going to fight each other in the end. And so you just need to pop open the popcorn and watch for some of these things. But there is a very dangerous element to this, and it is in promoting even more conflict in order to get the upper hand for their projects. So this is also something for countries to be worried about. I mean, in a sense, you know, the the Saudis and the Iranians now are looking at the Turks um, pushing through in these areas that they consider part of their backyard, and are they going to sit still?
I don't know about that, but as you bring up Iran, because I wanted to get into this,
Mhm.
Pezeshkian recently visited Pakistan, right? He
Over the
visited
weekend,
Islamabad,
yeah.
and he got some very interesting comments from the Pakistan leaders. I don't know if you have them at hand. I'm trying to look them up right now, so we can mention them briefly. The Prime Minister of Pakistan said we support Iran's peaceful nuclear activities, and they signed agreements that will reach up to $10 billion. So as far as this race, right, it does seem like people are starting to kind of pick sides very quickly. Do you think anyone in the Gulf is interested in working with the Iranians? There any possible, because Iran is also a vital part of the BRI of China's Belt and Road Initiative, or is this just about let's replace Iran with anything?
No, you see, I remember, look, where the Saudis will be sensitive on one thing on Iran, they will have common cause on another. I mean, for instance, both the Saudis and the Iranians are members of OPEC, and at times both of them have wanted higher oil prices. So then they have common cause. In this case, I'm saying an aggressive Turkey, either militarily or economically, is going to create common interest for the Saudis and the Iranians, who did not have lines of communications before, but do now, thanks to the Chinese brokered rapprochement, which I swear time has flown. Was it 2024 or 2023 that this
20, no, it
happened?
was 2023. It was a few months before October 7th.
Okay. So, that rapprochement has opened conversations, and we've seen the rewards of that, the different position the Saudis took during Trump's visit to the Gulf after he became president this time, Trump 2.0, was basically, a chorus of do not go to war with Iran. We want stability, development, economy. Those are Iran's keywords. I mean, to hear the Gulf talking, you know, almost entirely about stability. I mean, basically Yemen persuaded them to take that track.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you, the Russians and the Chinese will not miss a beat in welcoming this new attitude among Persian Gulf Arab states, because those two global powers have been pushing for a common security pact among Persian Gulf littoral states for a few years now. And if that manifests, it just cuts entirely the US's ability to, stir up conflict among neighbors there. So I mean, I'm not saying the Saudis and Iranians are friends. I'm just saying that the lines of communications have not only been open, they've deepened in the last 2 years. And now opportunities are rising, um, by both of them watching a very aggressive Turkey basically storm into two very critical countries that either border Saudi Arabia or Iran, or are, there within their sphere of influence.
Indeed. I think with that, we can wrap it up for this week, unless I don't know, Karim wanted to add something. I want to
Yeah,
thank.
I wanted to
Go
add
ahead.
something for our Patreons. We opened a chat room for our Patreons to collect questions. We received some questions, but hopefully we will receive more interesting and more deep questions, so we can answer you and make a dedicated video for these questions.
Yeah,
A bit
and
of
we
shade
will.
thrown by Karim.
I think what we're going to do is we're going to answer them on our live podcasts on Thursdays. So we'll collect questions on Monday and Thursday, or between Monday and Thursday, and answer them in a special segment on your Patreon member page. Also, just to let our patrons know that today they will be the first and only ones to see the Cradle's first episode of Deep Dive. Okay. And the deep dives are where we do little segments on contentious issues, or, questions that are in all our minds and we get asked often. And this one is really on Israel's multi-layered defense, military defense system, and how every single layer of that system, and there's at least 7 or 8 or 9, including foreign countries, was penetrated and made vulnerable during the 12-day war. And that in effect, this amounts to Iran being able to ultimately achieve 100% target success rate.
Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us. Make sure to check that out. I just want to very quickly mention Corbin. It cracked me up. He's like referencing the Scarface lines. I will gather all of the random Scarface lines before I do the one everyone wants to hear. Thank you so much for joining us this week. Before you leave, make sure to leave your like. We'll see you on Thursday, same time, same place. Bye bye.
Bye bye.